I mean, when I was traveling the continent and living in Ethiopia, I was just struck by how much talent is on the continent. Like there are millions of professionals who are smart, educated, speak great English, so capable. And there's a real shortage of jobs on the continent. And especially in a global world, these younger kids are seeing American companies that they love the brands, they support what those brands are doing, and they want to work there. And unfortunately, when they go to apply, they're automatically declined based on the country that they're living. And so that was one thing that I thought, like, wow, this is a problem I can solve because I know the talent and I can connect them to these US companies, and make it a meaningful win win on both sides.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Valerie Bowden. How are you doing today, Valerie?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same. I'm super excited.
So, I always like to kick off the show and talk about the importance of networking. How do we know each other?
We know each other through Marcus Ogden, who was a guest on your show. I was a guest on Marcus's show, and Marcus is also a client of ours. He's hired one of our virtual assistants from Ethiopia.
That's incredible. I always say Marcus is one of my favorite people. I was fortunate enough to way back in the day be a guest on his show as well, and
Mhm.
he's in there's hundreds and hundreds of episodes. So it's always great to kind of connect with people and then reconnect as well.
He's amazing. Yeah, he's someone I really admire, and yeah, I'm so glad that he connected us today.
It really is great. And I think it's one of those extra levels, especially as you know, in this podcasting space, when someone sends over a guest that they think would be a valuable add to your show, but also for them and they develop as how
Mhm.
they are developing on their career. It's just great to connect, like-minded people.
100%. And I think there's so many people who aren't authentic out there, and it's sometimes hard to weed that out. So if you trust someone, they can recommend someone that they trust. It just makes it so much better.
I couldn't agree more. So Valerie, I want to know a little bit more about you, that origin story, comic book issue number one. Who's Valerie?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest. Shout out to Fort Wayne, Indiana. But I, for some reason, always had this dream of traveling the African continent, even though I didn't know anyone who had really been there, knew nothing about it. It was always my desire to go there. So, fast forward a little bit, when I was 25, I decided now is the time. I quit my job and I bought a one-way ticket to Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow, that's incredible. And you mentioned growing up. I mean, that's kind of a unique dream, I'd say, for someone from the Midwest. Me being from the Midwest as well, it's a lot of times we don't leave a whole lot. And what do you think prompted that goal or that dream?
I after college I had done like a 3-month volunteer project in Ethiopia, and it was a good and bad experience. It was good because I loved Ethiopia, like right away. I loved the coffee, the food, the people, the culture. But it was bad because the nonprofit I was working with two. One of them was even like celebrity backed. I found out was illegally operating, and that was kind of my first introduction into the nonprofit world, that it's not always what it says it is. There's some great ones out there, but the ones I was with, I didn't really support what they were doing. And so I came home thinking, wow, Ethiopia was so different than I thought of, so different than I thought Africa would be. And people don't need me to volunteer. So then I kept doing school, did grad school, and then thought, okay, now I have to go back to the continent and see more countries and just see what the rest of the continent is really like.
So you mentioned you had done some work in Ethiopia.
Mhm.
Then what made the pivot or the decision to go to Cape Town, South Africa?
It was for 2 years after Ethiopia, I kept thinking about the country, and I even got, like, a tattoo and, like, the local language. I was practicing, and I was like, "This is so crazy that for I was only there for 3 months, and I've thought about it every single day for 2 years. There has to be a reason for that." So I need to go back and figure out, was that a one-time experience because of the people I was with, or is there a reason why I feel so drawn to go back to this continent? And because Ethiopia is so different than I expected, what are the other countries like? And then because I was so broke after grad school, that's how I decided to backpack, because that was like the only way I could afford it, is if I had a backpack and a tent, and that's how I could make it work.
I think it's one of those things as Americans, I don't think we often realize how large of a continent Africa is, especially no
Mhm.
thanks to the maps that, the common that is commonly used. It makes it a much smaller portrayal than how large it actually is.
Yes, it's huge, and I didn't know until I started traveling that every African country is so different than its neighbor. So I would cross the border, and then suddenly, like, the language changed, the landscape changed, the people, the culture, the history, the religion, everything about it was so different, and that's what it made it so cool, because it was, for me, I did 13 of the countries. There's 54, and all 13 were radically different than each other, and so it made it really fun to see the diversity.
So how long after that one-way trip were you in, I guess, South Africa, but then as you mentioned, you traveled elsewhere?
Yeah, so, I spent about 7 months traveling through 13 countries, from, like, Cape Town all the way to Cairo, and then after doing that, I arrived in Cairo, and I was like, "Well, I can't go home, like, yet." Like, after having so many incredible experiences, gorilla trekking, whitewater rafting on the Nile, in Ethiopia, I fed a wild hyena raw meat out of my mouth. I was like, "I can't go back to, like, 9 to 5 Midwest America," and so I did go home for Christmas, and then right away I went back to Ethiopia for just 6 months. That's what I told my parents, like, only 6 more months. And then I kept renewing my work visa over and over and over until eventually it was 8 years later that I finally came back to America. But I came home with, like, a husband and a baby, and had really spent a lot of time on the continent after that.
That has to be an absolutely incredible experience. What did you learn while you were over there? You mentioned 8 years, which is a little bit more than a 6 month visa.
Yeah. Oh man, I learned so much. I mean, I grew a lot as a person. There was just so many values I liked about the Ethiopian culture. Just like a value around community and being there for each other. Just being more present. So like I felt like I just became a better person. Also just being overseas kind of shifted how I thought about things politically. I mean, it was just such an eye opener. But again, it also made me really excited about the idea of job creation, because I had, again, because of my background in social work and my initial experience in Ethiopia, I visited more nonprofits and charities and tech hubs and missionaries. And I visited all different organizations. And what my takeaway was, people need jobs, and that's actually what gets people out of poverty. And I switched from, the nonprofit world, going into business, wanting to create jobs that had a bigger social impact on the communities.
Valerie, that's incredible. I think it's one of those things, as you mentioned, you grow. And of course, nothing against the Midwest, but I think a lot of times we kind of are stuck in or we like to stay in our own little lane, our own little bubble. And I think exposure is such an important thing, whether you're going there for a little while or in your case, 8 years. I think realizing how different the world actually is so important.
I agree. I tell young people today that travel is the most responsible thing that you can do, because it truly makes you a better person. If anything, it just stretches you outside your comfort zone. It shows you that you can do hard things. It shapes the way you think about the world differently. And before you have kids and a mortgage, why not travel as much as you can? Because now I do have 2 kids and a mortgage, and I still travel, but it looks significantly different, and it's much harder and more expensive to even plan and do.
It really is. So you mentioned also, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't really understand or really don't know is the idea of job creation and
Mhm.
that kind of economics at play when it's not just handouts. Because I think a lot of times talking to different people of all different backgrounds, a lot of times it's not the desire for a handout. It's like, no, I want to work. I want a job. I want to be a global citizen, if you will. Maybe it's not articulated that way, but it's like I want to contribute to the economy. It's not that I just
Mhm.
want free stuff. Especially, I think we get kind of lost with some of the nonprofits and the commercials you see on TV and understanding how vastly
Mhm.
different Africa is compared to what we often are shown.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was traveling the continent and living in Ethiopia, I was just struck by how much talent is on the continent. Like there are millions of professionals who are smart, educated, speak great English, so capable. and there's a real shortage of jobs on the continent. And especially in a global world, these younger kids are seeing American companies that they love the brands, they support what those brands are doing, and they want to work there. And unfortunately, when they go to apply, they're automatically declined based on the country that they're living. And so that was one thing that I thought, like, wow, this is a problem I can solve because I know the talent and I can connect them to these US companies, and make it a meaningful win-win on both sides.
So, on everyone's journey, and especially your journey, I'm sure there was many forks in the road. Can you give
Mhm.
me a time where you just made a decision and went for it and how it turned out?
Yeah, I mean, there was several decisions. First, when I decided to actually even do my backpacking trip, nobody supported it, right? Everybody was against it. It was right when the movie Taken had come out, and so everybody thought I was going to get like kidnapped. And it was a true choice to follow my gut instinct and go to where I feel like I was being led. And it wasn't easy at first. Like I was scared on the plane ride over. In the first few weeks of backpacking, I didn't know what I was doing. I made so many mistakes. But now I look back and I'm so grateful that I pushed through that discomfort, and followed my heart's desire, because it's changed my whole life trajectory. And the people who were the naysayers and were against the trip are now, saying like, wow, that's amazing. I wish I would have done something similar.
I appreciate you said that. And I think sometimes I've realized, of course, there are people who are naysayers just for the sake of
Mhm.
they don't want to see anyone succeed. Maybe they missed opportunities in their life. But I think I've learned over the years, a lot of times it's just that concern and it's that fear of the
Mhm.
unknown. It's the fact that they never did it or never desired to or were too afraid to do it. I think sometimes it comes with love. Of course, sometimes it is like, yeah, I don't think you can do it because I don't think anything positive about the world. But
Mhm.
it's one of those things I think I've realized over the years. Those people sometimes change a tune or have a different opinion once you actually do see that success.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely a mix. There were some people who were like, "You need to settle down. Like, that is the responsible thing to do." And there were some people who really cared about me, but they were just really worried about safety, right? And so, I think, yeah, I've learned just to trust my gut instinct. And also, I mean, when I did travel, I was careful, right? Like, I wasn't, I was a responsible traveler, and I did do the best I could to stay safe. And then thankfully, once I started traveling, especially African countries, I found out statistically they're more safer than the US. So I was doing things like hitchhiking, which I would never do in America. But yeah, it's definitely a lesson learned is, you got to do what's right for you.
So now take me into that journey of actually starting the business. You see the talent,
Mhm.
your background in social work knows that there's people who are looking for jobs. What did you do next with that?
Yeah, so I was living in Ethiopia for a few years, and one day I was hitchhiking and I got a ride to with someone who worked at an outsourcing company, and he was like, "You know what? They're trying to hire an American to help them with their American clients." And so I went to the office, I got the job, and that was the first time that I realized that there are large Fortune 5,000 companies who are hiring in Africa, like big names that and so that's how I kind of got my foot into the outsourcing world. And I did that for a few years until I realized, wow, these big companies really don't care about their Ethiopian team members. They don't pay them well. They don't care about their career. They don't even want us to mention online that they have teams in Africa. It was very hush hush. And so at that point, my family and I moved back to the US, and we landed in Pittsburgh. And I was pregnant with my second child. And I thought, you know what? This is the time again to do what I feel called to do. So I quit my job and started my own outsourcing company with the goal of making outsourcing fairer, more ethical, more fun, and better quality, and just like a better win-win on both sides.
I think, Valerie, it's one of those things you mentioned trusting your gut. I tell
Mhm.
people all the time, the more you do it, I think it's almost the easier option, even though to the
Mhm.
outside world, it doesn't seem like it. But I always compare it to like a roller coaster. The first time you go on a roller coaster, it's a little terrifying. You do that
Mhm.
drop, it's exciting because you end up being all right. And I think a lot of times with life and going into the unknown, going into those experiences, of course, you still feel a little, you just quit your job. That's terrifying,
Mhm.
but you've done stuff like that before, and I think it gets a little easier and almost I don't know if it's exciting, but maybe I'd say exciting when you start kind of being led into those places.
I agree. For me, it does get easier because you can always look back at your last experience and be like, okay, if I can backpack across Africa by myself, I can start a company by myself. I can figure out this legal contract. But I would say it's also It's fun to tell now because now I'm 3.5 years in, and so now I do have the success to back up that decision, but that first year was really rough. It didn't make a lot of money, and there were a lot of times that I thought, "Wow, I could have just stayed at like, a comfy 9 to 5 job, had more money than I had now." Um, but again, it was sticking with that and knowing that that was the right choice and figuring out the path to make it actually successful.
Oh, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. Can you tell me what you are working on now? As you mentioned, you started the company, and now a few years in, you started to see success. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, now I'm really proud to say that we have 120 team members in Africa. They're all working for our clients, mostly in the US. We've seen incredible success with US businesses who want to grow, they want to scale. They're a tech startup, they're a small and medium business, and they're like, I need to grow, but I don't have the money to hire locally for it. And so they decided to go outsourcing. And we become a really awesome option for high quality, perfect accents, managed offshore services for you. And it's so fun to see like the win-win of an American company succeeding and growing their revenue, but also these amazing team members who are all throughout Africa who are just doing such a great job and able to work from home and make more money. And just the cultural exchange that kind of goes with it has been really fun.
Absolutely. What is the title of your company, and where can people learn more about it?
Yep. So it's called Cradle because Africa is the cradle of humanity. And we hope to be kind of the birthplace of transforming your company with some great offshore team members. And anybody who's interested can always go to our website. It's cradle.com. Cradle spelled CRDLE.
I was going to ask, since I have you, what are some common misconceptions about the whole outsourcing things? Because I think sometimes it's assumed as a negative or something people don't know, or it's taking advantage of someone, or this, that, or the other. I would love to learn a little bit more about how that all works.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think the biggest misconception we have, just as the outsourcing industry, is that the quality will suffer if you outsource it. And when you're in the outsourcing industry, there's a lot of gray areas and a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of middlemen that kind of take a lot of the money so that the people actually doing the job don't get paid very much. But for anybody who's looking to outsource, as long as you vet your candidates, choose the ones that have the good accent, and you train and onboard them like any other team member, and you provide like that daily stand up and accountability for them, they're going to do such a great job. Um, just to give you an example, we had a client who hired 3 of our sales reps, and then within 6 weeks, they had generated $100,000 of new revenue for his company. But he had spent 1 hour a day training them. And then we've had other clients who come on board and they don't do any training and they give a list to the cold callers and they're like, start dialing. And the cold caller is like, wait, how do I pronounce the company's name again? And they just have no real information about the company. And so what happens is, as an American, you get those phone calls from people who have had no proper onboarding or training, and you think, wow, this quality is bad. They sound like robots. All outsourcing is bad. And it's not. It's really the company who didn't set those team members up for success when there's so many ways you can do it and make it work for you.
Valerie, I love that you mentioned setting team members up for success because
Mhm.
I think that is so important. Just like any job, any position, I think a lot of us have been there when, especially in the corporate world, they're like, "Oh, here's the handbook.
Mhm.
I guess you can start your day now." And you spend the first couple weeks just kind of existing at a place, and you
Mhm.
slowly start just sometimes just finding things to do to, pass the time, and then hopefully you either leave that job or you actually start to get some real
Mhm.
instruction. So I can envision it being very similar in the outsourcing world as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many examples of companies doing it right. Like if you can onboard American team members the right way, just replicate that for your outsourcing team members and they'll do well. Mostly it is like a lot of job shadowing and daily stand-ups and training and all of that stuff. And if you give them the right support, they'll do great. I heard it said once that like talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. So you just have to recognize that there's so much talent across this world. I'm obviously biased towards Africa, but even Philippines, Latin America, India, there's so much talent there, and you just need to give them the opportunity to be trained right on the job and to perform the job that they can do.
Well, Valerie, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. I really did appreciate our conversation.
Same. It's so great to be here and be able to share my story.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.